Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cracking Addiction. My name is Dr. Ferghal Armstrong, and this is Dr. Richard Bradlow. Hello, Richard. How are you?
Good, thank you, Ferghal. Thank you so much for having me on. Always a pleasure to be here.
Back again by popular demand. So, can you believe it?
This is my second podcast today, Ferghal, so I've got options.
Is it?
Don't feel like I need this podcast. I can be
You've
a
got
guest on
options.
several podcasts.
I feel that that's going to be a pop song, I've got options, like Elton John started singing about the fact that he's still standing, but you've got options.
I've got options.
Anyway, I thought we'd talk about sleep before you fall asleep.
Fantastic.
So, so you're a psychiatrist as well as an addiction psychiatrist. So you've got a lot of expertise in assessing mental health, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to say a statement. Every single mental health disorder that is diagnosable by a psychiatrist is impacted by sleep. Would you agree with that?
Years of university degrees have made me look to whenever a question has every single thing. I know that that's not the option on the MCQ, but I think I am going to agree that sleep and mental illness is a bidirectional relationship, and it seems to be ubiquitous throughout mental illness.
Right. So what does bidirectional mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was hoping that there would be an MCQ option and I would be able to answer you from there. That's what my medical training set me up for. Bidirectional means that the flow of the causational flow is in both directions. Thus, poor sleep causes mental illness, and mental illness causes poor sleep. And it differs per mental illness. So, for instance, if you're talking about that melancholic depression, it's a very, very severe form of depression. You're looking for a very particular sleep pattern where people find it very difficult to get to sleep, and then they wake up very early in the morning and they can't get back to sleep. So they often say, I go to bed at 8, I'm not asleep till 12, and then I'm up at 3, and I can't get back to sleep. Yeah. So that classic melancholic sleep. But there are sleep patterns for all sorts of different mental illnesses, as well as lack of sleep and severe insomnia causes all these mental illnesses.
Right. All right. So there's a lot to tease out here. So let's go back to depression. So you said that melancholic depression, which I understand as classical depression, early insomnia and late insomnia, and so the depression causes the insomnia. But there's another kind of depression, isn't there? Well, I'm sure you know that there's lots of depression, but atypical depression, what kind of effect does that have on insomnia?
Yeah, so atypical depression, you get hypersomnia. So typically in depression, what's called atypical depression, because typically in depression you lose your appetite and you get worse sleep. But in atypical depression, you seem to get more sleepy and eat more. And it goes on. And interestingly, in terms of anxiety and mood, poor sleep really affects the emotional regulation and anxiety and decision making. And so poor sleep absolutely causes anxiety and deficits in the sort of prefrontal cortex and decision making and inhibitory processes. But at the same time, anxiety will lead to people having more difficulty going to sleep. In fact, I would say that the most common sleep complaint I get in my general psychiatric practice is difficulty getting to sleep due to anxiety, which is separate as well from sleep anxiety, where this is someone who's probably getting an adequate amount of sleep, but gets obsessed about their sleep and is constantly getting anxious that they're not getting enough sleep, which is also a common complaint I have. So sleep is, absolutely key to mental illness.
So you've said sleep anxiety is due to people, even though they're getting enough sleep, feeling that they're not. That begs the question then, well, how much sleep do we need?
So it goes down the older you get. But I mean, a handy, and it also is very, idiopathic to the person. So for instance, I know that if you want to dismantle a socialist state, you only need 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night.
Say that
I think
again.
that one's gone over your head. So that one's gone over your head. Margaret Thatcher famously only needed 3 to 4 hours sleep a night.
Ah, right. Now let me talk to you about Margaret Thatcher, right? So
bet you've got some
Margaret
views.
Thatcher, as you said, famously only needed 4 hours sleep a night, right? As did Ronald Reagan. Now, I will argue that slow wave sleep is absolutely essential. Well, all sleep is absolutely essential for health. And later on in our series on sleep, we'll go into the brain waves or maybe even now, depending on how things go. But specifically, slow wave sleep increases the function of the glymphatic system by up to 60% at night. And the function, or one of the functions of the glymphatic system, is to actually wash away amyloid. And we all know what happens when you don't wash away amyloid. You get Alzheimer's. So Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan both famously needed only 4 hours sleep, but they both famously also died of Alzheimer's disease. So there's a cautionary tale that, when we think about how much sleep we need. I mean, I take the rubric that really you need 7 to 9 hours sleep. Everyone thinks they're a hero and only need 7, but the best way of finding out how much sleep you really need is to spend a week without an alarm clock and work out what time you get up and what time you go to bed, and that'll give you the answer. So, how much sleep do you reckon you need, Rich?
I actually, and it's biased right now because I have 2 small children, but I actually tend to get in bed by 7:30 every night. I generally put my daughter to bed and get into bed at 7:30. I'm woken up throughout the night, and I'm probably only going to sleep at 8, and I'm generally getting up between 5 and 6. But I'm aiming to 9 to 10 hours of sleep. But I'm still so tired. It's because it's poor sleep because of the baby. On your Alzheimer's disease and the brain's lymphatic system, there's actually was at a conference once. A guy gave a very interesting Belgian guy where they're using in nursing homes for people with severe Alzheimer's disease. They're using a sort of music therapy during deep phase sleep to encourage the lymphatic system, which was very interesting and very promising results.
Yeah. Oh, there's no doubt about it. The frontier of sleep research and the devices that we can use to actually induce and maintain sleep, not from a pharmacological point of view, but from a kind of a device point of view, it's amazing. But let's get back to mental health and sleep. So I'm trying to regain the train of thought here. So we've established that sleep and mental health is a bidirectional relationship. We've established that melancholic depression, you have a lack of sleep. Atypical depression, you have excess sleep. And anxiety, you've also got a lack of sleep. What about the opposite of depression? How does sleep relate to manic states?
Yeah. So again, very interesting because obviously, in a manic state, you don't need to sleep for days on end, but lack of sleep can bring about a manic state. So again, it's that bidirectional relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. So
there's some people that believe very strongly about the dangers of daylight saving and mania, and they feel that just the shift in the body clock by 1 hour can cause havoc to people with bipolar.
Well, we're talking about the dangers of sleep, right? Or rather, sleep deprivation. Let me tell you the story of what happened in Greece round about the year 2000. So at that time, Greece very much embraced the custom of the siesta. So shops would open from 8 o'clock in the morning through to midday, and then they'd open again. They'd shut at midday, then they'd open again at 5 to 9. So there was an 8-hour day. But between 12 and 5, everyone had lunch and went to sleep, right? And then there was this pressure to convert that kind of lifestyle to what we would call the Northern European model of working, where everyone works from 8 till 5 or 8 till 6 without this kind of long siesta lunch break. And so they did that. The incidence of mortality and heart attacks increased, especially in middle-aged men. So that speaks of two things. Firstly, the absolute necessity of sleep and the fact that sleep deprivation is associated with such widespread societal disease. And secondly, it also speaks to the fact that you don't actually need 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep in a 24-hour period. You just need the total. So you can actually have, a sleep in the afternoon and a sleep in the evening. So, cultures, engage in sleep differently, but I think the total amount of sleep that you need really is 7 to 9 hours.
How did Winston Churchill sleep during the war?
I don't know. You tell me.
So I don't know if this is. I'm pretty sure he slept polyphasically, where he would do Yeah, like a baby, like 424242. That's so he could always be on call. I don't know if that's just a rumor now. I'm trying to look it up,
Well,
but I believe that's
since
how he slept.
since since you bring that up, so I heard of this system whereby you divide your entire life into 4 hour blocks. So 6 4 hour blocks. And in each of those 4 hour blocks, you get 30 minutes of sleep. So you totally get effectively 3 hours sleep a night, but you're up for, 21 hours. I've seen people provide blog diaries of how they're getting on with that, and they seem to be able to survive. But again, survival for a year on polyphasic sleep is not the same as the sleep that you need to actually prevent long-term ill health. But the second thing I wanted to say about that is that you mentioned Winston Churchill. Apparently, one of the reasons why D-Day was so successful is because Hitler was asleep and no one wanted to wake him up to tell him that the Allies had
Yeah,
invaded.
yeah,
So, are we
absolutely.
saying then that historically polyphasic sleep wins over monophasic sleep?
I mean, I believe that was what what Second World War was. It wasn't fascism versus democracy. It was polyphasic sleep versus sleeping in. I'm pretty sure that was it.
Oh dear. All right. Well, I've lost the train of thought. So we're talking about sleep and the importance of
Yeah.
sleep.
The other interesting thing
And
about
you,
sleep with mental health is the role of sleep has on attention and potentially weighing into the sort of massive increase in prevalence we've seen in ADHD, and the idea that
yeah,
perhaps increased screen time and decreased sleep, which is what we've seen in recent years, is massively
absolutely.
decreased
Yeah,
sleep is feeding into this increased ADHD.
yeah,
And
yeah.
as a junior doctor, I did many uh, you know 12 to 30-hour shifts, and I can tell you my decision making at the end of a 30-hour shift was terrifying compared to my decision making with a good night's sleep.
Well, there's a couple of things that I'd like to say to that. I mean, first of all, you've mentioned screen time. I mean, screens, unfortunately, are associated with blue light, and blue light is one of the key things that will switch off melatonin. And without melatonin, you don't fall asleep. So if you want to delay the onset of your natural sleep, looking at an iPad in bed or watching TV or staying up late and playing video games, looking at a screen is exactly what you need to do to really, really screw up your sleep routine. And following on from your point about, the fact that sleep deprivation is impairing, two things. Firstly, the Guinness Book of Records has now banned sleep deprivation endurance records because they recognize the sheer harm that sleep deprivation causes to all living creatures. And secondly, if you look at human
Sorry, just
function and
I'm
human
glad we're
concentration,
using the Guinness Book of Records as how it must be serious. The Guinness Book of
it
Records
must be
has ruled it
serious.
out. I
Hey,
thought this
listen,
was all a joke until you hold up the Guinness Book of Records. Now I realize how serious sleep deprivation is.
yeah, and we're not talking about the BMJ here. We're talking about that tome, the Guinness Book of Records. But the if you are sleep deprived, if you stay awake for 16 hours, right, you are as impaired as you are at 0.05 breath alcohol. So that's the drink drive limit, right? And if you stay awake for 24 hours, you are as impaired as as having a breath alcohol of zero point 0.1.
I mean,
So
this is great, but do you mean in terms of drive behind the wheel or impaired how?
in terms of attention, focus, performance, visuospatial performance, you are as impaired. So effectively
This
driving.
sounds like a difficult to measure stat. I don't.
Well, no, it's been measured. So the point I'm trying to make is, right, we rely on the hospital services in the Western world relies on sleep deprived junior doctors. If you have been working for more than 16 hours, you are as impaired as if you'd had a drink and you were blowing zero point zero 0.05. Yet we as a society are happy to accept that level of dysfunction from sleep deprivation. But woe betide you if you rock up onto the wards and knock back a shot of whiskey and blow zero point zero 0.05. You would be summarily, well, in my training hospital, you'd be summarily executed. But most of the time, you'd be marched off the premises. So it's so pervasive, the effects of sleep deprivation. I'll give you another example. They did these studies on ethics and ethical awareness, right? So they analyzed the function of a howitzer battery, right? So these soldiers were launching shells at targets, and they were simulating target practice with a howitzer, right? And when they've been fully slept, they've had 8 hours sleep, and it's within 8 hours of their last sleep. They're all fully slept. They obey commands, but then the command comes in, shoot these coordinates, and they know that those coordinates are the coordinates of a school full of school children. And immediately the gunnery sergeant asks for clarification of that order, right? 48 hours later, when they've still been up and they haven't slept, they get the order, same order. They don't even equivocate. Bang, they just fire the weapon. So our ability to calculate the morality of any decision, again, is completely eradicated by sleep deprivation. Now, going back to the Guinness Book of World Records, right? I just wanted to say something else.
It was weird that we strayed away from the Guinness Book of World Records.
Yeah,
I thought this podcast was a Guinness Book of World Records podcast.
All right. So have you heard of fatal familial insomnia?
I have, actually, yeah.
What do you die of from fatal familial insomnia? How does sleep deprivation kill you?
Fatal familial insomnia is this terrifying hereditary illness where sometime in, I believe, your 30s, you just get insomnia until you die. It is a terrifying illness.
It's a terrifying illness. So it's
autosomally dominant, I believe.
I don't know about that. I don't know the genetics of it, but my understanding is also associated with the formation of prions, right? So it's a prion disease which specifically targets the thalamus. And remember, the thalamus is the gatekeeper of the sensory system. So any sensation cannot get to the cortex unless it goes through this thalamus. And during sleep, the thalamus acts as a gatekeeper. But if you've got lots of holes in your thalamus, then you're going to get sensations going through the thalamus up to the cortex, and therefore you can't fall asleep. And so that's the mechanism behind fatal familial insomnia. But sleep deprivation ultimately kills you, and it kills you quicker than starvation. So you die of deprivation of oxygen after 3 minutes, 3 days of water. I want to say about 15 to 20 days of sleep deprivation, and then 3 weeks with food. So that's just another indication of just how severe sleep deprivation is on the human body. And you die of sepsis, amongst other things, because sleep deprivation impairs the immune function. And so your gut barrier just, falls apart. And you get all these bugs, you get endotoxemia into your blood system, and you die of sepsis.
Yeah,
so I think we've hammered home the idea that sleep deprivation is bad for you and sleep is essential for you.
On terrifying sleep diseases, by the way, I looked it up, it was 45 to 50 when it onset. On terrifying sleep diseases, Ferghal, tell us about encephalitis lethargica.
Robin Williams.
Yeah,
right.
But no, Robin Williams. Was that about encephalitis lethargica? I think that was about.
So Jonathan Sachs, Robin Williams played. Sachs. It was beautiful. It was, what is it? A Beautiful Mind? No. Awakenings.
Awakenings. Yeah.
Awakenings, right. So Robin Williams played the character of Oliver Sacks. So encephalitis lethargica is basically, they think it's due to flu.
So you get this Spanish flu that really took off.
Yeah. So you get this influenza illness, and it causes a brain inflammation and encephalitis that basically puts people into a stupor. That mimics sleep. But Oliver Sacks worked out that using high doses of dopamine agonists, which are usually reserved for the treatment of advanced Parkinson's, they can actually wake up. And they did have this lucid interval, but unfortunately, the treatment only lasted a short period of time. There was some kind of resistance to the treatment, and they reverted back to their previous stupor. But that's all I know about it. Is there anything else you'd like to add about encephalitis?
No, it's good. And I'm also going to add, talk to me about the tsetse fly.
Oh, yeah. Tsetse flies transmit sleeping sickness, which is trypanosomiasis. Is that what it is? I know you're checking up the internet, asking me this.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
like a
Yeah,
fiver exam.
trypanosomiasis. Yeah.
Yes.
Very good.
So it's a
Yeah.
parasitic infection transmitted by tsetse flies, and it causes, a sleeping sickness that I think you can recover from it.
And then finally, we talked about melatonin. And if I was to say I could buy a $5,000 milk carton 5,000 yen milk carton from Japan, what would I be buying?
5,000 milk carton from Japan. I have no idea.
5,000 milk carton. 5,000. This is a great thing from Japan.
Right.
They milk the cows around sunset, and it's got more yen in it. It's got more melatonin in it. So it costs about $50 a carton. But this is a big sort of delicacy in Japan. It's high melatonin milk to have before bed.
Of course, melatonin milk. Yeah, but I think we're going to have to start talking about melatonin in the next episode, because unfortunately we've run out of time today. So for today, Dr. Bradlow, thanks very much for your expert opinion and badinage as always, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me.
That's all for today, folks. This has been Cracking Addiction.